Good morning, everybody. It's Mike. Happy Sunday. I recently had the pleasure of speaking in front of the Rotary Club of Flagler County and telling them about ham radio. So what I'm going to give you today is a video that I shot of that. It's not high production value, but there's a couple of nice stories in there I think you might be interested in. And if you have any questions, don't forget, you can email me, ko4pdi@1791.com. Ask your questions, leave comments on the video. Don't forget to check the links in the description of the video for discounts on all kinds of cool stuff that you might need. So this is KO4PDI, the Ham Fun Guy. Enjoy the video. 73. All right, does anybody here, are you a ham radio operator? Raise your hand. Just me, huh? I'm the only one. Thank you for that. Yep. All right, so what is ham radio? I thought it was glorified CB. You all remember CB in the 70s? Remember in the 70s we used to get a little box about this big in our car plugged into the cigarette lighter, and we'd take a magnet on the roof with an antenna, and if I could talk 3 miles away, I was like, yeah, it works. Well, since then, my brother was a ham back in 2009, and ever since I moved to Florida, he's like, Mike, you got to get your ham license. I'm like, wow, I don't need a CB radio. I got a cell phone. I can go use somebody else's phone if mine don't work. I got a hardwired phone at my house. He goes, no. Because here's the thing. How many people depend on your cell phone specifically to communicate with everybody in your life? Right? We all do. And you use it to go on the internet and find out answers to questions you might have, right? Okay. What if, just a hypothetical, the proverbial poop hits the fan and the cell phones don't work, the internet don't work, the wired telephones don't work, everything dies. How are you going to communicate with anybody? You're not, unless you are a ham radio operator. How do you become a ham radio operator? Well, you got to take a test. But you don't have to be a ham radio operator. You could be a GMRS radio operator, which is not as far-flung as ham. But for $35, you just buy a license. They give you a call sign. Mine's Whiskey Radio 3, Whiskey Radio R. I don't even remember it off the top of my head. That's why I have it on a label on my GMRS radio at home. But with that, I'm a storm spotter for Flagler County. I've been to the Aries class, learning about weather and storms. And the reason we do that is because in Flagler County, you have Doppler radar in Jacksonville and you have Doppler radar in Daytona. But when you get here, they can't see below 5,000 feet. They don't know what weather is happening here unless we, the storm spotters, report it to the National Weather Service. I do that with a GMRS radio. It costs $35 to get a license. You buy a radio for about $200, a little handheld like these, right? And I can drive around and I can get on there. They start a net when there's a severe thunderstorm warning or something. Bob Pickering over at the Emergency Operations Center starts a net on the GMRS frequencies. And wherever I am, if I see a tree down, if I see flooding, I can call in on that net, tell Bob, Bob reports it to the National Weather Service. If you ever had one of those apps that shows the weather and you see a little spiral thing like a cyclone, that's because one of us said we saw a funnel cloud. We reported it and they mark it right in your app, whether you have Weather Underground or anything else. But that's not ham radio. That's more for family stuff. You're bringing your kids to Disney, well, not Disney, they don't let you do it in Disney, but anywhere else, you're allowed to use your radios, talk to your family when you're at an amusement park or something like that. But ham radio reaches even further. Like I said in the opening, I have talked to Australia from my car, which a kid from the 70s who was happy he went 3 miles on a CB is like, did I just talk to Australia? What was your call sign again? And he gives you the call sign, starts with AK. AK is Australia. So I knew I talked to a guy in Australia. Did that from Washington Oaks Park. So that's ham radio in a nutshell. But I mentioned it's a hobby of hobbies. There is digital ham radio, where I just sit at a computer and I send signals out digitally, and people from all over the world answer me. Say, hey, I heard you. You were a -5, or you were a +10, or whatever. They let me know how good my signal was. That's also fun. But it's nothing like getting on the radio and calling out your call sign, and some guy in Slovenia responds to you and says, yeah, this is so-and-so in Slovenia. I hear you're a 5'9". What that means is 5 means he heard me clear as a bell, and 9 is as strong and quiet as possible. All right, that's fun too. That's a lot of fun. The digital's fun, I do that. The talking to overseas, they call those DX contacts because you're contacting a country outside of your own. But that wasn't what did it for me. When somebody said to me, you can talk on satellites, I'm a kid from the 60s. I followed the Mercury program, the Gemini program, the Apollo program, the space shuttles. I have a season pass to Kennedy Space Center. I love it. That's my home away from home. I say that's my happy place, not Disney. Kennedy Space Center. I can go there, spend hours there often. All right, so what do you mean by that? Well, you can talk on the radio, bounce it off a satellite, and somebody will answer you. I said, how do you do that? He says, I don't know. I went, no, wrong answer. I got to know. How do you do that? He goes, I don't know. This was my Elmer, and Elmer is the guy you choose to teach you about ham radio. He didn't know. He'd done it, but he didn't know how it happened. Well, that set me on a quest back in 2021, right after I got my license. I wanted to do this. And then he said, I even talked to an astronaut on the International Space Station. And I stopped. Hold the phone. Hold on. Wait a minute. You're talking to astronauts while they're in space? He's like, yeah. He shows me a video. Anybody know James Lee? James Lee used to live in Palm Coast here. Went through a very unfortunate medical situation. He lost all his fingers and his legs below the knee. This man doesn't let it stop him. But before he was in the accident, in the medical problem, he's you know who Jim Cantori is, right? If he shows up, we evacuate, that guy. All right, so he used to be his cameraman, and he was into ham radio. He's got 4 kids. All 4 of his kids were extra license holders, which I failed that test 3 times, okay? All 4 of his, and I tell his kids I hate them. Before they were 9 years old, they had their extra class license, and I'm still jealous of them. All that gives you is more bandwidth to talk on. But anyway, I digress. So James calls up my buddy Jim, who lives over in Benel, says, come on, I'll come pick you up. We're going to talk on the International Space Station. And my buddy Jim was like, what? He's my Elmer. This was before he was my Elmer. So Jim pulls up in his car. James pulls up in his car. Jim jumps in. Boom, they drive into the middle of a broccoli field somewhere in Benel. And he starts talking on the radio. And they hear an astronaut on the International Space Station. So he hands my buddy Jim the microphone and says, talk. He's like, what? What do I talk? He goes, ND1C, Echo Lima 99. That's our grid square. You tell them your call sign and your grid square. The astronaut comes back and says, welcome aboard the International Space Station. And he's like shocked. So he hands James the microphone. By the time he handed James the microphone, the pass was over. The astronaut was gone, and James never got to talk to an astronaut. But my Elmer Jim did. So he tells me the story, and he shows me this video, and I'm like, damn, I want to do that. How do you do that? He goes, I have no idea. So I was on this quest to learn how to do this. Spent a lot of money on stuff I really shouldn't have bought. But that was the best way for me to learn, because I knew what worked and what didn't work. And now I have a system at my house. Any satellite at any time comes over my house, I can talk on it without even blinking an eye. It's so simple, I just push a button and it goes. And I have a 50-foot tower in my backyard with a pair of antennas that rotate to track the satellite through the sky. I have a box that controls those antennas and the radio, because the satellites are moving at 17,000 miles an hour. They pass over, maybe it takes them 10 minutes to go across the sky, and out of that 10 minutes, maybe you get 8 minutes where you could actually talk on them. So it's a hit and miss thing. You got to know what you're doing. I made a lot of mistakes. Like I said, I bought a lot of equipment I really didn't need. But now I know what I'm doing. I'm standing here as an AMSAT ambassador. You're looking, that's ARISS. Let me show you AMSAT's page first. This is Amateur Radio in Space, AMSAT. They are 50 years old. They have been around a long, long time. They're the ones that keep track of all the ham radio satellites that are in space, and let you know when they're going to be, where they're going to be, how high they're going to be, and what you can do with them. Then there is ARISS. These two organizations used to be one. Now they're two separate things. ARISS is amateur radio on the International Space Station. AMSAT, I am an ambassador for. So this is my way of giving back and teaching people about ham radio and satellites. ARISS, I'm good friends with the president of ARISS, Frank Bauer. He's done a couple of interviews on my podcast. I do a YouTube channel all about ham radio, and this is going to make you laugh. I got business cards here. If anybody wants one, just you can have one. Anybody? Here, here's a couple here. There you go. There's a few there. Now, so anyway, AMSAT and ARISS used to be two different companies. They're the same thing now. I'll tell you this story. My channel is called Ham Radio Fun with KO4PDI. KO4PDI is my call sign, assigned to me by the Federal Communications Commission after I passed the preemptive tests that I had to take. So why do I call it Ham Fun with KO4PDI? Okay, I went to a ham radio convention in Huntsville, Alabama 4 years ago. I went to the DX dinner. That's the dinner where all the guys that want to see who talked to who all over the world, they all have a big dinner together, and the keynote speaker comes out and he says, what is it with ham radio guys? You get 3 ham radio operators in a room and in 10 minutes you have 2 clubs. It's true. And now, I don't know you guys. I've never been to a Rotary meeting. However, I am sure this happens here. There's egos. There's people that think it should be done this way that make a lot of noise. And there's people that think it should be done this way and they make a lot of noise. But then you ask them to do it and they're too busy. They ain't got time. I was blown away when you asked for volunteers, and that quick you got 3 volunteers. I'm inviting you all to join the Elks. We need you there because nobody volunteers for nothing at the Elks. We got to get them moving again. Got to get them active. Anyway, so on that note, I decided I'm starting a channel where I want to show how much fun it is to use ham radio. That's what I did. So now that's, oh, who was that? I met that guy, was Randy, was the astronaut you were looking at there. This is my website. You'll never guess what the website is. ko4pdi.com. How easy is that? That's my website. You can go there. I have pictures of me on here with, let me get the mouse moving. You can see this. That's my radios in my car right there. Here's a bunch of, there's a picture on the right. That's what I have set up in my car. The one in the center is what I talk to the satellites with. And the one on this one here, this is my antennas. There's different antennas up there now. That's a 50-foot tower in my backyard, and that's a rotator on top. And literally when the satellite comes over, it does this. It tracks it right through the sky. Starts low, like that, and tracks the satellites. Notice there's 2 different antennas. One is for 2 meters, and one is for 70 centimeters. What is 70 centimeters? What's 2 meters? You know what AM and FM is? Audio modulation, frequency modulation? You didn't know that, though. Come on. Who knew that? Who knew that? That's what they stood. That's what AM and FM stands for. Well, those are bands. That refers to the frequency. What is the frequency? The frequency is the size of the electromagnetic wave put out by the antenna when you transmit a signal. Okay, well, in ham radio, we have bands. We have 2 meters, which means from 0 to the peak to the valley back to 0, that's one wavelength. If you looked at it on an oscilloscope, that's what it would look like. That is 2 meters long, which is about 6 feet. So when you transmit on 2 meters, you're sending out 6, all right, picture it this way. You're standing by a lake. It's a still lake. The water's not moving. You take a rock, you throw it in, and then rings appear, and they move out. Those are waves. That's the frequency of those waves is the band you're on. So on 2 meters, your wave is 2 meters long. On, let's see, 70 centimeters, your wave is 70 centimeters long. On 10 meters, your wave is 10 meters long. That's what it stands for, which is about 30 feet, each wavelength. That goes up into the ionosphere, hits the molecules up there, and starts hitting them. You ever see those balls? You let them go, and the click-clack thing goes back and forth? That's what happens up in the ionosphere. The molecules are banging into each other and transmitting that signal through the sky. And it goes through the ionosphere like this, like as if it's just bouncing around in a tunnel. And that's how I'm able to talk to Australia from my car, because my signal went up into the ionosphere, bounced around, everything was just right. The heat of the sun on the app, because that's the thing. The heat of the sun is what adjusts the ability of you to transmit through the ionosphere. So that's what's happening there. Now, when you're talking on satellites, not the same thing. You're just directly hitting the satellite with your signal. This is a military type antenna. They call this a tactical antenna because you can fold it up small, but it's actually made of a tape measure. And with this walkie-talkie, I can talk on satellites. Now, what's really nice about this particular walkie-talkie, this has software in it. As a matter of fact, let's just see, well, what the heck, let's see if there's a satellite in the area. All right, the ISS is coming up in 53 minutes. What I can do is I'll just pick one satellite here. I don't know if you could see this. There's a little circle with a line. I'll bring this around where people can look at it. You can see the circle. You see that line? That's the track in the sky that the satellite is going to take when it comes by. And when I hit the push to talk on here and give out my call sign and my grid square, it'll go up to that satellite, and that satellite will retransmit it back down. Now, because that satellite's so high in the sky, where it can reach is further than where I can just reach with this antenna. So it goes up, hits, say this microphone is the satellite, hits the satellite, comes back down, and the footprint that it can reach is 3 times the size I could just get over the air. That's what this is. That's what this radio's for. This radio is more for local stuff, which I was going to do a demo, but the particular repeater I wanted to use, which is in the hospital on 100, is not working right now, which is not a good thing for me to tell you because I'm trying to explain to you how this is good when everything turns to crap and something turned to crap and it ain't good now. So go figure. What can I tell you? But anyway, this particular setup is very easy. This is more for local. That's a little box in my car, but the Wi-Fi in my car is shut off, so it's not working. That keeps trying to connect, but it's not gonna, because my car's shut off right now. But anyway, so this you would talk locally, something like the GMRS radios I was telling you about earlier, and this you could use to talk to satellites and the ISS and all that. I didn't want to do all that. I wanted to go for gusto. I didn't want to guess. I didn't want to try. So I started working with the antennas I showed you, that tower in my backyard. And I went to use that, and I'll never forget, the first antenna I had up there is what they call an egg beater, and that's exactly what it looks like. It looks like a mixer from a blender. Not a blender, a hand mixer that you make cakes with. That's what it looks like. It's shaped the same way. It works, but not as good. But the first time I tried it, I gave out my call sign and grid square, and when I first heard somebody come back to me, because when you come back to somebody, you say, KO4 PDI, Echo Lima 99, blah, 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 and you give your call sign. Well, that blew my mind. I'm talking to somebody from space. This is incredible. For a kid that watched John Glenn go up, and Alan Shepard, and Gus Grissom, and I'm hearing somebody talk to me from space, well, I'm done. Just, put the dirt on it, bury me, send me away, I'm done. I've made it. I've done it in life. That's how I felt. When I did it in my driveway, I had a handheld like this, and I was doing it all wrong. I was not doing it the right way. But I gave out my call sign and grid square, and somebody came back to me, and I stood there in awe that I'm talking to space. I remember Telstar, when they first transmitted a television signal from California to New York. I remember that. And here I am doing it in my driveway with a walkie-talkie with 5 watts. Not even like a dish, not just a little walkie-talkie with a little antenna in my driveway. So imagine my excitement the time I'm sitting at my desk and I'm talking on the radio on the International Space Station, and I hear NA1SS is listening. Well, NA1SS is their call sign. That means I was an astronaut. So I said, wait a minute, NA1SS, what astronaut am I talking to? This is KO4 PDI. He says, oh, it's Woody Hoberg, NA1SS. And I said, hey, Woody, how you doing? He's like, good. I said, have a great week. It was 4th of July weekend. I said, have a wonderful 4th of July weekend. He said, thanks a lot. I said, get home safe. But when you know it, last year, I think it was in October, he came home. He splashed down right off the coast of Jacksonville. Literally, you could see it go across the sky right here when he came home. I'm waiting for the day when he's the guest astronaut at Kennedy Space Center because I'm going down there to shake his hand. I talked to him twice on the International Space Station. There was another guy, Kjell Lindgren, who is very prolific on the ham radios. He was on there every day, they have off time, and that's when they play with the ham radios. But the ham radios are for more than that. Yes, they talk to us, and yes, us ham radio operators get all giddy when we talk to an astronaut, and you mail them what you call a QSO card. A QSO card is a little postcard with the date and time that you talk to them, and who you talked to and what you did, and how much wattage you were using, and you mail that to a guy in California. He then checks the astronaut's log to make sure it's legit, and he sends you a QSO card with a picture of the ISS on it. I have 7 of those now. So I donate to ARISS whenever I get a chance, because every time I do, they give me a challenge coin, which is pretty cool. But I have 7 of these cards at home to prove that I actually did talk to these guys. And it is a lot of fun, but it's not just there to have fun or give the astronauts something to do in their spare time. We in Flagler County also have a situation where we have a thing called SUPCOM, Supplemental Communications. In our Emergency Operations Center, down on 100, we have ham radios. And those ham radios give them the ability to talk to Tallahassee. When everything else doesn't work, they can get on those radios and still reach Tallahassee. And they actually just upgraded it. They put a 100-watt another amplifier in there. I forget how many watts it is. But they added an amplifier, which will make it even better. But they do a drill last Wednesday of every month to make sure they can get the national emergency communications and the state in Tallahassee. So just know that if the blank hits the fan and nothing works, they'll still have communication because they have a separate supplemental communications department. I even have the shirt with the little logo for the Flagler County on it, but I don't wear it because I don't volunteer anymore, and I don't want to abscond with anything I'm not entitled to. Yes?
Back in '85 when we had the bad wildfires through here,
Right.
we lost long distance service for the phone lines. And ham radio operators were the ones that were able to talk outside the county. Back then I think it was called the American Radio Relay, didn't it?
Yes, ARRL.
Yeah. And
I'm a member of that too.
after that, they entered into an agreement with them to be able to do that on a continuing basis. I'm glad to hear
They still have it.
quite a bit.
They set up, well, first of all, that building is built, that's like a bunker, that place. If you ever, the one reason I volunteer is in case of the real big ones coming, I got a place to hide. And they have great food there when there's an emergency. Boy, they bring in the best food. Oh, anyway, so that's what they do with ham radio. Ham radio is considered a service because it's so vital in case of an emergency. When North Carolina got swamped over the hurricanes and stuff, ham radio was their only way to communicate until Elon Musk sent a bunch of Starlink dishes over there for them to use to get some internet in there. To me, that's one of the most amazing accomplishments in my lifetime, besides walking on the moon, which some people believe, some people don't. People that don't also believe the world is flat, whatever. Let them have their belief. Just stay away from me. That's not me. But anyway, when Musk sent up those Starlink satellites, I mean, you see he's doing like 2 launches a week, putting those things up there. There are over 7,000 Starlink satellites going around the Earth, and those he's not done yet. When he gets this Starship going, he's going to be launching the super duper Starlink satellites that'll be able to handle 10 times more volume, and you will be able, with your cell phone, to talk via satellite anywhere in the world. No matter where you are on the planet, you'll be able to pick up your phone and make a call and talk to somebody somewhere else in the world. Anybody got any questions? Go ahead. Anybody got any questions? Yes, sir.
With the shutdown of Voice of America, do you see your type of work filling that void?
No. No, it's Voice of America, for what it was at the time it was created, was fantastic. It isn't that now, and it hasn't been that for years. It used to be trying to get the Voice of America over the Iron Curtain. I remember seeing commercials when I was a kid, and it was to get to the communist bloc countries in Europe was the main reason for having Voice of America. That need is gone. There's so much stuff now that they can be doing. It is an amazing thing, and the technology has blown up compared to what it was back then. So we could do I could do more with this stuff than I could do with the Voice of America transmitters and receivers. There's so much better stuff out there. So it's a wonderful part of history. I don't see it's not going to affect ham radio. Ham radio is probably the least thing that people are getting into right now, which is wrong. They really should be getting into it. That's why I'm here talking to you, to let you know that this is a very vital service. And if you get into it, be ready to spend some money, because I mean, $200 here, $500 here. The tower, I got the tower for free. My guy calls me up, he says, "Hey Mike, you want a tower?" I'm like, "Wait, what? You want a tower? What do you got?" He goes, "I got a 40-foot tower with a 10-foot pole on top. You want it?" I'm like, "Yes." It's free. Only cost me about $5,000 since then, because the tower's the cheap part. Then you got to put the concrete in the ground to hold it. You got to put all the equipment on it, the antennas. Well, each antenna is about $500. The poles, the router. This thing here that turns and aims the antennas on top, that's called a rotator. That's an azimuth, which is horizontal, turning this way, and elevation, so it can tilt the antennas like this. That is $1,000, right? So, you know, and I made mine specifically so that, God forbid, a hurricane's coming, God forbid, it happens every year. I can just lower it horizontal onto my backyard, and it's safe. It's not going to go anywhere. Anybody else got a question? You, sir.
This goes way, way, way back, but remember trying to get a Boy Scout badge for Morse code. That's how far back, but I guess it's still right.
You don't have to get Morse code anymore to get a license.
No, I know
They took that requirement away.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have a license.
And I spent all those years being an idiot trying to do it, but I guess it's still used in a military situation, or it's not Morse code, but it's something like Morse code.
Well, you heard my radio do that,
Yeah.
right? That was Morse code. The radio's repeaters are required to identify every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes, they identify with Morse code. That's what that was. That's what you heard when it was going beep, 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 beep. That's the repeater identifying itself. But you don't have to do that. You could talk and identify yourself when you're on HF radios, that every 10 minutes you give your call sign out, just so you're proving to people you're legit, which is good. I hope you enjoyed that little conversation I had with the Rotary Club of Flagler County, Florida. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for giving me a platform to tell people about ham radio. Rotary Club's a very, very legitimate charity. If you want to get involved in your community, Rotary Club's definitely a way to go. I happen to be an Elk member, but the Rotary Club is just as amazing. As a matter of fact, this particular Rotary Club every year does a beautiful Christmas display at the Town Center Park, Central Park and Town Center. So, check them out, and check out the Rotary Club. On that note, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, I'll say 73. This is KO4 PDI. I'll be clear. Oh, and don't do anything I wouldn't do, at least not without me, all right? KO4 PDI. I'll be clear.